Oh, I guess you'll have to mute your phone too, or that'll be weird too. But
It's not going to mute it 100%, so I'm going to have to leave the spaces. Oh, well. Maybe another time we do that. Yeah. So, we're here. This is episode 1 of another Texans podcast. My name is Patrick Storm, and I'm joined tonight by a good friend and fellow co-host, John Crumpler. John, how are you?
Storm, I'm doing well, man. I'm excited for football season. I'm excited to have some real content to talk about, and I'm excited for this podcast. I think you and I both have been talking about wanting to find we love our Twitter spaces, and I think we're definitely going to keep doing those. But I think you and I are both looking for something a little more permanent, a little more sustainable to host really these shows we've been doing and give people an opportunity who can't hear us live to go back and listen to them. And
Yep.
I'm really excited it worked out with this podcast, and I'm grateful for the Texans Wire for agreeing to host us as well.
Yeah, it is. It's fantastic, man. I've been debating for the past, 6 months, trying to get something going again and get back on the mic and pushing content out, and to finally for something to materialize like this is pretty cool, man. I'm excited, and I'm glad that I got to do it with you, given the success that we've had with everything. So, man, let's kick it off.
First, I guess I do want to point out, because tonight we are live on Twitter Spaces and YouTube concurrently. I don't know how long we'll do that for, but I'd like to do it for a while as we kind of introduce our audience. So if you are on Twitter Spaces with us, Storm's here. Can someone give me a thumbs up in the Twitter space if they can hear Storm? Have they been able to hear everything we're talking about? Because otherwise, it's going to be a little goofy that I'm doing both. Or give me a thumbs up. Okay, James Roy, God bless you. I gave it the thumbs up. So if you're on Twitter Spaces, thank you for listening there, guys. Pat, what is our @ going to be on YouTube? Tell the people.
It's just as the name looks at. It's at Another Texans Podcast. Very simple, very straightforward, nothing too fancy. So we're just, it's when I bounced this idea off of, so I'll be 100% transparent. This name is kind of a ripoff of, there's a Dolphins podcast that of a few guys that I met when when I was a part of Texans Unfiltered, and we were a part of the PFN group, and those guys over there were really great. There's a couple guys over there that have their own spinoff show, and it's called Another Dolphins Podcast. And I just thought the name was very, very simple, but very funny and catchy, just given the fact that there's nowadays, especially for every team, there's so many different podcasts out there, and it's very difficult to come up with a name. So I said, you know what,
Yeah.
Screw it. And I asked him, I reached out to Josh and I said, hey man, I wanted to ask you before we even put anything in motion, if we could, spin off your name. And he said, bro, go for it. He goes, we're all here just to have fun and talk football. So have at it. So,
it's a great time to be a football fan. He was talking about Houston. There are a lot of good podcasts. Steph's killing it on YouTube. Landry's on YouTube. Texans Fan Battle's doing their thing. Harley and Ruben. You've got McLean and Pendergast. There are a lot of Texans podcasts right now. So I do think it is aptly named that we are Another Texans Podcast. So for anyone on the Twitter Spaces, to circle back, if you want to give us a subscription there or come along, we're going to be going through the chat. If people are there, we're going to take questions at some point, or we might even take them from Twitter if we can. Pat, sorry, I think that's enough formalities. Let's talk some football, because you, my friend, were at training camp today.
Yeah. So today was day 4 of training camp, second open practice for fans. And today was the first day that I was able to graciously attend as media. The Texans have been very, gracious to allow me to attend as media. So I get to stand over on the side with all the media members, watch from a different angle, have a better vantage point of the second field where some things happen that the normal fans don't get to see because it's so far away, right? You got the field that's right there front and center with all the bleachers, and then you've got the track that's got the big shed. I call it a shed. It's a big awning where the players go and sit. The training staff, and has a bunch of stuff under there. And there's two more fields beyond that. And so where I was at today, you have a much better vantage point of being able to see the stuff going on over there. There was some off script work going on the third field that unfortunately we can't talk about. But that's normal. There's a few things going on that second field. Nothing too what do you call it? Private, I guess. They're not doing anything that's proprietary. So we got to see some throws from all the quarterbacks to the running backs, some handoff drills, very basic drills. Just them kind of going through the motions and stuff like that. And then the meat of everything today was on the main field right there in front of all the fans. And we got to see a lot of really, really good stuff. Obviously, we've got CJ Stroud in his rookie year. We've got Davis Mills coming into another year with the Texans. Case Keenum is back. So you've got, 3 good quarterbacks out there on the field that are slinging the ball around to some wide receivers that are flying. And you've got DBs that are flying as well. And I can tell you, John, from last year to this year, the atmosphere at camp is complete opposite. Last year was not nearly as energetic and exciting just from the atmosphere, just being there. It's so much more fun this year than it was last year. And it's exciting, man.
Fantastic.
It's really exciting to see all this unfold. So,
well, that's amazing. One, congrats on getting to cover camp this year, Pat. I'm really excited for you. And let's talk some football. It sounds like we've got great energy in the building. And if it's okay, let's go offense through defense, and we'll start with the quarterbacks. If I could give an anecdote about training camp last year compared to this year. Last year when I was at Texans training camp, I am standing underneath the tent with DJ Bieniemy from ESPN, and we are betting over under 1.5 throws over 20 yards for the entire day. That was the state of the Texans offense. And this is going to be a bit of a grind. Not a lot of excitement. I mean, there was some optimism, but not a lot of genuine excitement to the level of where we now are a year later with obviously CJ Stroud coming off, led the FBS in passing touchdowns, was at times the best quarterback in college football, and he's in a Houston Texans uniform. But for now, DeMeco Ryans says that it is still a competition, and CJ himself endorsed that it's a competition. He has to work today. What are your initial thoughts on the Texans quarterback competition, if we could start there?
Well, I don't think it's much of a competition, I'll be honest. I know they're all going to say it. I know, Carolina's already named Bryce as the starter. We got a lot of hype coming out of Indy where Anthony Richardson is taking all the first team reps up there. We haven't heard much out of Tennessee yet, right? Which
they've got Ryan Tannehill, so that makes sense.
Yeah. So I could kind of get that one. But with Houston, and I'm completely unbiased, right? I really am excited to see CJ Stroud take the field. But Davis Mills did some really good things today. Just from what I saw, he made some good passes. He made some good reads. He was stepping up in the pocket. He was patient. He was letting plays develop. Granted, there's no pads. They're in shells. And so if anybody doesn't know what that means, they're wearing padding under their shirts, but it's not a full set of shoulder pads. It's there just in case they bump into each other, something like that, to kind of add that little bit of protection for them. So they're not going full speed. But Davis did some good things. CJ did some really good things too. Even Case Keenum did some good things. Case's role, I believe, is pretty much set. I think he knows he's quarterback 3 on this roster. But I feel like the things that CJ was doing and just the way that he was going about things and the way the ball was coming out and where it was being placed for the wide receivers, that is what separates the two for me right now. I was talking with Landry, and we were watching as they were kind of doing, you got 2 quarterbacks going and 2 receivers running a route, and they're running identical routes. and watching when the ball comes out for each guy, Davis's ball came out a lot quicker, right? It's like he has this clock in his head that he's counting down like 3, 1, 2, 3, boom, ball's coming out, regardless of where the receiver was in his route. CJ was more of letting the receiver get into the route, get into the break, and get where he feels like the receiver may be open, and then the ball was coming out, almost like he was being a little more patient and letting the play develop. And granted, there's no defense, there's nobody covering these guys; they're just running naked routes right now. But it's almost like he's trying to get a feel for things. He's trying to get a feel for where in that route should he be throwing the ball. And he was doing the same thing once they had the one-on-ones with the DBs too. And again, still there were some big differences between the two of them. So I feel like CJ has the edge right now, just from natural talent. I feel like he's going to be the guy, and I feel like 99% of the fan base is probably.
It sounds like the team expects that too. If we've heard as much from Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard, the two highest paid players on the team, that they've both called CJ Stroud QB1. Pat, I'll ask you this question because this is someone I'm not able to go to camp. I'm in Atlanta right now. I've got responsibilities with school. So if these two are close right now, and by all accounts, it sounds at best the competition is close, but there are a lot of people who say that CJ's playing better. I guess maybe 1 or 2 people are there have said Davis is better. But if they're close, what my head goes to is what is the benefit of making this a competition? Because if they're remotely close, you're probably going to go with the guy who just needs more snaps, who needs that time to develop in the system. What do you think the coaching staff's rationale is, if you had to guess right now, for why this needs to be entertained as a competition and why Davis Mills should be taking first-team snaps away from someone who is not only the future of your franchise, but one thing long-term, but short-term, just watching through 4 practices probably gives you the best shot to win more games this season. What do you think the essence of the competition is?
I think it's they feel like everybody's got to earn their spot, and a lot of these guys on the coaching staff have earned their way up through the ranks, right? That's how it is. DeMeco's come from being a player to a defensive assistant to the defensive coordinator, and now he's a head coach, right? He's risen up through the ranks. The same thing with a lot of the other guys in there. So I think it may be just their mentality and the philosophy that they live by, that it's just not going to be handed to him on a silver platter just because he was a second overall pick. He's going to have to go out there and earn it. And DeMeco talked about that post-practice today, that regardless of when CJ is taking the snaps, whether it's with first team or second team, he's doing his absolute best to maximize those reps. And so he's not taking it as a negative. He's just taking it day by day. And he's keeping his head down, and he's doing what he needs to do to go out there and earn his spot. And I don't think it's a bad thing to be, going with the twos. I mean, yeah, granted, you're not working with the same offensive line, but if you're going to be the starting quarterback for any NFL franchise, you've got to have chemistry with every single skill position player that's going to be on the roster. And so you're going to have to take snaps with the twos. You're going to have to take snaps with guys that are not going to be your frontline skill position guys. And so what better way to do that than take a few snaps with the twos? I wouldn't read too much into it right now. I mean, we're weeks away from the first game, the first real game. We've got a couple of preseason games coming in, but I don't feel like it's anything major to be worried about, if anybody is.
Yeah. I've been critical on Twitter to this point because I don't understand what it is to benefit. But to DeMeco Ryan's credit, and I've said this after every tweet, I say, I respect, this is his football DNA. This is something he fiercely believes about the game, that everything has to be earned. It is just something that comes with the territory of having DeMeco Ryans. And really, it's a good thing. I don't know if it should be there with the quarterbacks, but 9 out of 10 times, and even potentially here, this is a really good thing. And it comes with the DeMeco Ryans territory. So I'm doing my best to embrace it. And I agree, Pat, I'm not going to really, flag the alarm until maybe after the first preseason game. If we're still doing this, I might start to ask a question of, okay, are we going towards a potential unexpected decision for the start of the regular season? I think that, so we were just in shells today, no full pads, which does make it a little harder to have observations about the offensive line, the running backs. And I think when we host next week's episode, we can talk about that at great length, because that's really the foundation of this offense. If the Texans are going to be a successful football team, it's going to be about the line and the running backs. There's a time to talk about that. But right now, based on what we can learn and what I think what a lot of people want to hear about is that wide receiver group. And, every day, Pat, just looking at the tweets that come in, whether it's you or anyone else at camp, Tank Dell is making plays. Robert Woods looked good. Nico Collins is making plays. John Mechie's making plays. Why don't you tell us your initial thoughts on what you saw today and maybe one person who after a day at camp you're a little more excited about than you were a month ago?
I mean, I know a lot of people talk down on the wide receiver group as a whole. If you look at it, there's just not, you don't have that one. Yeah. I mean, it's fair. It's fair, right? You don't have that one guy that sticks out. Like you don't have a DeAndre Hopkins. You don't have a Stephon Diggs. You don't have a guy like that on your roster right now. And that's okay. Because, they can, with what they've got right now, it looks like they're going to be able to make things work, right? Tank Dell is going to be, the guy is flying around. He's getting into space, which is something that I'm super excited about because he's finding the holes. He's finding the seams in the defense where, a quarterback can just, even if it's 7 yards, just check it down to him. Or if he's blown the top off the coverage and he's coming across the middle and he made a diving catch today from Davis Mills on a throw that I thought was intended for Robert Woods. That may have been intended for Robert Woods, but even if it sailed over Woods' head because Davis overthrew him, Tank Dell was there to make the play, and he secured the ball, and it would have been a first down for 25 yards. It was nuts. It was just absolutely nuts, and I feel like it was awesome. I think John Mechie, a lot of people talk about Mechie being out of football for, I think it's 18 months now he's going on, and he's finally back. In my opinion, doesn't look like a guy that's been out of football for 18 months. There's a little bit of rust there for somebody that's maybe coming into camp that hasn't played football in a little bit, but he looks good. He looks crisp. His routes are nice. It's going to take him a little bit of time to get his endurance and everything like that back up. They're being super cautious with him. And like you said, Robert Woods has made some nice plays. He's kind of had a real quiet camp so far. He hasn't made anything spectacular by all accounts, but and Nico has shown some flashes. Nico did some really good things today. So I'm really excited about that. He had one that was just barely over him, just barely out of his reach from Stroud today. And it's going to happen. They're trying to figure it all out right now. Nobody's perfect out there. So
whenever it's these deep plays generally being reported, is Stroud more comfortable just letting it go with the deep ball than Davis when it's when it's the team drills against the defense, or is it?
I couldn't tell a difference today.
Okay,
they were both slinging it. They really were, and I know one point that people kind of questioned about CJ's game coming out of college was that he was afraid to pull the ball down and run. He did that a few times today.
Okay.
So that was different to see. Again, granted they don't have pads on, that he's going full speed, but he was going through the motions and doing something that maybe he's just trying to learn and get a feel for, and that kind of surprised me a little bit.
Well, he's going to have to practice it to do it in the game. Yeah. It's going to take, and the way I've described it to people, it's like having a read on the play. It's like, when you look at this receiver, instead of working to the fourth option, it's, if I see this, I can go, kind of being coached that there are the right moments to run. So for me, that's really optimistic. And, the team posted that clip earlier this week. I was not going to freak out about that. I know a lot of people were retweeting, getting excited about, Stroud's running. And I'm like, well, this is not a great angle to know if he should be running, like if he's actually running in a meaningful way. But overall, I do think fans can be encouraged that the Stroud, everyone ad nauseum talked about, if we get the CJ Stroud from the Georgia game, that could be a top 10 quarterback. And I think the biggest difference in the Georgia game was someone that trusted themselves, not just as a passer, but as an athlete. So it is encouraging that he's trying to take those steps.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, the tight ends too. The tight ends did some really nice things today. I saw Brevin make a very athletic catch. He had to lay out for it, and he did it, and he came up a little bit banged up, but he was fine. Dalton Schultz was doing some good things, and then unfortunately Jimmy Ward was going a little bit too hard and took him out.
That's why we signed him.
But Dalton went up and, went into the tent, came out, and he had his helmet back on later on. So all clear there, a sigh of relief, because everybody were, from where I was standing, was like, man, this is the last thing this team needs. But that's football, man. These guys are all out there going hard. They're all out there trying to earn their spot. And, some collisions like that are going to happen. So, I'm excited, man. I feel like the offense is going to have some really cool things happen with it. Dameon Pierce is a bowling ball, man. Like he was knocking people on their ass today unintentionally, just being himself, just hitting a hole, and someone's coming up and he's knocking them over. So that was fun to watch. So
I kind of expect him to be the best player on this offense by, I don't want to say significant margin, but it might be significant. Like I do think he's talented enough to be the focal point of the offense in this scheme. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, I think at this point, I don't know who else can really take him off that spot, except for maybe CJ. I hope it's yet to be seen. Yeah, naturally.
CJ. Also, because I think we're up to, looks like we've got 57 people with us right now in the Twitter Spaces. Just want to plug this throughout the night that, again, Pat and I, we're starting a channel. It's going to be another Texans podcast. You'll be able to listen to this whole thing on Spotify and anywhere else you find audio after the show. But in the meantime, if you're sitting at home and you want to give us a follow on YouTube and join us, is there a chat room on YouTube for us tonight?
Yeah. There's 24 people on the YouTube right now.
All right, awesome. So, if you want to see our faces while we talk about this team, you're welcome to it. If you want to see your Twitter feed, you can stay there, but just want everyone to know that we are there. Going back to the receiver discussion, Storm, I put this out earlier in the week, and I'm really upset because I was just too tired to write this article after my week in the ICU. But I had this idea for what the Texans offense might look like based on the receiver group, and I want to pitch it to you, and I want you to tell me if this might align with what we're seeing today. Could I? Okay. And it's a long way, but I'm just curious based on the skill group that we have. So, in the way I phrased it was touchdown to check down, and it's something. It's a phrase I stole from Nate Tice on the Athletic Football Show. He's talked about that as defenses hover towards these cover two shells. So, for anyone listening, two deep safeties back, they're really trying to protect the deep play. And they're prioritizing kind of coming at everything as quarterbacks go to the check down. And, of course, that's what made D'Amico's defenses so great last year in San Francisco, the swarm philosophy that you've got all these guys keeping things in front of them and swarming. Yes, if you're on the stream, Pat has the shirt on today from camp. Join the swarm. Yep. But I think what the Texans might have an ability to do this year with this group is if you've got one or two guys who can go deep, maybe I think that's going to be Nico Collins. It might be John Mechie. It could be Xavier Hutchinson, guys who can force the defense vertically. And you've got some real close threats to the line of scrimmage. That's going to be Dameon Pearson, Devin Singletary in the run game and potentially off screens. I think that's going to be guys like Tank Dell. You're going to open up this vacuum in the middle of the field. And it sounds like the Texans do have a lot of great route runners to potentially exploit. Hey, you're going to have some matchups with these big space windows in between 6 to 15 yards. Like, go shake your guy, and you've got CJ should be able to find you there. Do you think – how do you see like what this offense might look like based on the receiver group?
I mean, if we're talking touchdown to check down, right, like there's going to be – I feel like the philosophy is they're going to really take what a defense is going to give them. And it may not be – 15, 20 yards down the field every single play. That's okay, right? We saw Brady for years dissecting defenses, taking what they would give him, and that's what won him 6 Super Bowls, right? So, like, I'm okay with it. There's going to be some big plays mixed in there, but I feel like it's going to be more of that philosophy of they're going to find the space and they're going to take what a defense is willing to give them, and hopefully be able to move the ball down the field consistently. Eat time off the clock, put up points, keep the defense off the field and keep them on the sidelines rested, which would be a stark contrast from what we saw last year. Actually, maybe the past several years, really, where the defense was consistently on the field. They were losing the time of possession battle. And by the fourth quarter, defense is gassed and they're just getting the doors blown off. So that's my hope. Looking at it, like I said, you don't have an elite wide receiver right now, but I don't think they're going to need it if they can really stick to the philosophy of what they feel this offense is going to be centered around. I feel like they'll be okay.
Yeah,
I feel like they'll be okay.
And that's part of how I've come to peace that I'd love for them to have a number one wide receiver. Don't get me wrong. If this team had, I mean, I'm trying to think of guys who people talked about, like a T. Higgins. Of course, you'd want that. You love a guy who you can say, go out and win. Please just go get us 8 yards on this play. I need you to beat the corner. But this offense is predicated on kind of lulling defenses into certain looks based on sequence play calling. And then, hey, this should come open based on how this play is designed. And I think they've got guys who can win in these short to intermediate spaces. So I'm optimistic as well that this can be an offense that they can be explosive at times, but they're not trying to be explosive every single play. They're going to win a lot like the Niners have won in the past with good play calling and a strong run game. I think we should pivot over the defensive side because someone that got a lot of attention nationally today was, I'm sure you saw, D'Amico Ryans was mic'd up on NFL Network, and it was him gushing about Will Anderson. And everyone who left camp today, they said, someone who was at camp today, they texted me, said, Will Anderson's the real deal. Like this guy, he's going to be a stud. He's making people look silly. And they don't even have the pads on yet. Pat, what is the energy around Will Anderson right now? What does that conversation look like? Because by all accounts, they overpaid to trade up to go get Will Anderson because they believed in him as a football player and as a person. And it sounds like he is meeting all of those criteria right now.
Yeah, I mean, the dude he gets off the ball quick. He's in the backfield quick. I know he's coming out of a 3-point stance, which a lot of people are kind of questioning. They want to see people. I've seen some people want to say they want to see him stand up, come off the edge. But man, he was making guys look bad. He was making guys look really bad off the edge today. There was several plays that if they were in pads and the quarterback wasn't wearing a red jersey, it's a sack. So it's, what do you want, my phone? Take it. It's one of those things that, the kids are here, and that's gonna be one thing with this show. You'll hear my kids eventually, and so I apologize in advance. But
hey, man,
it is what it is.
I love it. That's you. That's authentic.
Yeah. So, he's, and one thing that I really noticed is he came out quietly onto the field, went through his warm-ups, and looked like just another guy until it came time for the ball to be snapped. I don't feel like he has this aura about him that he feels like he's, one of the top dogs. And I may not be saying this right, but I feel like he's a guy that's going to go out there and work his ass off and try to make plays for this defense and try to make sure that this team wins games. And that's something I absolutely love about him. He seems very humble. He seems very about the team and not about Will Anderson. And it's only been in 4 days in practice, with OTAs and stuff like that as well. But I feel like they, maybe they overpaid a little bit, right? They gave up quite a bit of draft capital. But if it works out in the end, if this guy turns into a perennial All-Pro, or a multi-time Pro Bowl player, in the conversation for defensive player of the year, defensive rookie of the year, double-digit sacks year after year, then at the end of the day, it was all worth it. And I think it would be considered a home run draft pick by the Texans.
Absolutely.
So,
and it's a piece that you have to have for D'Amico Ryan's defense. The front four has to, it is the engine of the defense, and everything's just a little bit easier when you've got someone who is going to demand double teams, who's going to have to be accounted for in offensive game plans. And it's just an absolute bonus. I think Houston saw this for years when the best player in your defense is also the highest energy, highest character guy that you want kind of leading that unit. And I think this is someone I'm excited to see how the rookie year goes, but I'm more excited to see what Will Anderson might look like in a year or 2 years once he's
Yeah.
really grown into an NFL weight room, once he's had some experience in the league, because this is a guy who's going to work his ass off, and he's got all the talent that you could ask for. And I think it'd be very scary. I think it'd be very scary for Houston's defense.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing is like this guy's coming in. He's still super young. He's still super raw. He hasn't had a chance to, really go through a full offseason program yet or a full season. Be in the weight room with them, get his nutrition right, those sort of things. And once you get a guy that has the ability like he has, that can come in and fine tune some of those things and then get stronger and get faster, then you got to look out because that's going to be a guy that offensive coordinators are going to have to stay up and have nightmares about because he's going to be in the backfield wrecking their plans on Sundays. So.
And Storm, while we're talking about the defensive line and that being the engine, which we hope Will Anderson's kind of the face of moving forward, who were the other starters today? Or I guess I don't think Will Anderson has been starting, but who's been starting on the front four, and has anyone else stood out that we should be watching out for them to cause some problems for opposing quarterbacks when we open in Baltimore?
I feel like Jerry Hughes is going to have, a pretty decent year. He's finally got somebody that's going to be on the opposite side of him, not a knock on Gernard and not a knock on guys like Jacob Martin and those guys, but he's got somebody on the other side now that offenses are going to have to game plan for. It's going to take a little bit of pressure off of him. And we saw Jerry flash a few times last year and do some really nice things, get in the backfield, sack the quarterback quite a few times. And so now that some more pressure has been taken off of him, and he's got a defense that's very, kind of fit to what Jerry's kind of built his career on. He's going into year 14. I don't know if you knew that. That's wild to me. When he was talking after practice, I had no idea. I was a little taken back. I was like, wow, really? 14 years. He's always been one of those guys that a defense is going to really depend on, and I feel like that's going to be another guy that's going to kind of shine this year. And I'm really looking forward to watching what Jerry Hughes does.
Yeah, I mean, he was honestly exceptional last season for what we expected when we signed him, and I agree that it can look a lot better when you've got a strong edge rusher on the other side. By the way, does Jacob Martin look better than his 46 overall Madden rating?
Man, I think that's got to be some sort of mistake, man.
I couldn't believe it when I saw it.
And it's funny because what it is 46, 40.
Yeah, I think it was like 47? A 46 overall. Like I wondered if they put him in the wrong position and that like what affected the overall. But
I don't know how. Yeah, I don't know how that works, man. But then you go and look, and I know it's an oddball position, and this doesn't really mean anything. But you look at a guy like John Weeks, and his rating on Madden is like over 1,000, which didn't know was possible, and I don't know what that entails.
What do
like,
you mean?
Can I plug?
Well, you're you're a 1 to a 99. How is he over a?
Yeah, so like, can I plug John Weeks in at wide receiver, and he's just going to go out there and just be running past DBs all day, and I can just keep chunking it down the field to him, or breaking tackles. So I don't know how all that works, but no, Jacob Martin looked good. I didn't see a whole lot of him getting into the backfield or anything like that. But again, a lot of times when they were doing some of that stuff, my eyes may have been, elsewhere because there's still so much other stuff going on. I did take a peek over at the special teams guys. And I know I tweeted this out earlier, but John Weeks is still legit. Like, he's still elite. Cameron Johnston is still booming the hell out of punts. And Kaimi is going to be doing, some good things. So that was fun to sit there and watch them do their stuff today too.
Right now during practice.
So several guys. I saw Tank Dell. They didn't really do like any live drills with that. They had more of them kind of coming off when they do the kickoff simulations, they don't, like, Johnson doesn't kick it, or Kaimi's not kicking the ball. It's actually coming out of a machine, maybe one of the jug machines that they've that maybe set up for that. And so there was a couple guys back there. Nothing that off the top of my head that I remember exactly who it was. But I know they would do some stuff like pre-practice. where they've got 6 or 7 guys kind of rotating through and taking them. A lot of wide receivers. Tank Dell was back there doing it, and I want to say Mechie did a few as well. So I think that's kind of an open opportunity right now. I don't think anything's even close to being set in stone on who that guy's going to be.
Got it. All right. And I think one other topic I'd love to cover, and then maybe we take some questions if anyone's in the chat or from anyone on Twitter Spaces. Again, for anyone Spaces tonight, thanks for tuning in. We're also simulcasting on YouTube, and we're going to be there moving forward. So drop us a follow. It's going to be at Another Texans Podcast. Storm, I want to talk about this secondary group. And I might give a broad level overview for everyone. I'm sure everyone listening is familiar with this secondary, but there are so many reasons to be excited. Let's just talk about the personnel. You've got Derek Stingley, the number 3 overall pick from last year, who is healthy and looking as strong as he's been. He's got a year in an NFL weight room under his belt. He's coming into a system with D'Amico Ryans that puts corners of his style, who are stronger guys who can play man, who can play press in good position. You're going to have Stingley on probably the other team's most talented receiver on a lot of snaps. You've got 2 guys. You've got Steven Nelson and Shaq Griffin on the other side. Steven Nelson's coming off one of the best seasons of his career and is technically sound enough and athletic enough that he's a really good number 2 corner. It's hard to do better than Nelson.
He had a really strong day today.
Yeah,
for sure. He really did.
That's fantastic. And then Shaq Griffin. I mean, this is a guy who was being given a day 1 free agency contract by the Jaguars. He goes to Jacksonville and he gets caught up in Urban Meyer's mess, is in a system that doesn't really benefit him, and he gets cut as a cap casualty this past offseason. And he specifically picks Houston's scheme. Tavier Thomas and Desmond King, my network, USA Today SMG, they ranked them as the number 1 and the number 4 slot corners in football. And then the 2 safeties, Jalen Petrie, obviously the only safety in the NFL last year who had, 140 tackles, 5 interceptions, and 5 forced fumbles.
Yeah, one of those wild stat lines. Like you sit there and look at it, and you're just like, damn, as a rookie too.
Mm-hmm. And then Jimmy Ward comes in to play the other safety spot. And you read articles about the 49ers training camp, and something they'll bring up is Jimmy Ward was the best communicator on that defense. They're having to figure out, how do we replace that voice? And all of a sudden, you have this sneaky talented, sneaky versatile defense, because Jimmy Ward can play some slot too. So you can start to play with them. Jalen Petrie, for those who don't know, he played the star position when he was in college. So he can play a little man coverage against tight ends and even slot receivers, kind of in a similar slot role. You've got a lot of guys who can do each other's jobs, who are really talented. I am so psyched to see. And then you've got D'Amico Ryans running it all, who was, of course, the assistant coach of the year as the defensive coordinator for the Niners last year. I cannot wait to see how creative he gets with employing this group, with deploying them. The ways that he can make a quarterback just have to think for half a second, 2 seconds longer because of how things change post-snap. And then just letting our talent go and win, and what that's going to do for making our edge rushers look good. Pat, and I'm sorry, that was a big overview, but I wanted to give some context to why this is this could be the most talented part of the Houston Texans team. And I don't think everyone knows that coming out of this offseason. So that was a little background on that. And it sounds like that projection is manifesting itself at training camp right now. How did the secondary look today? What are people talking about with the secondary?
Obviously, Jimmy Ward sticks out, right? The guy comes in, he's been in the league for a number of years now, and he was right in a lot of guys' hip pockets. He made the play on Dalton Schultz today. He, even if it wasn't his guy or the receiver wasn't really his responsibility, as soon as the ball went out, he was breaking towards it and making an effort to either knock the ball down or make a play on the wide receiver. And I feel like that's huge, because when we watched Petrie last year, Petrie was one of the lone guys back there that really had any semblance of what was going on. And now you're going to pair Petrie with a guy like Jimmy Ward, and that duo right there is the one duo that I'm looking forward to the most to watch this year. I really am. Jalen Petrie has was everywhere today, absolutely everywhere. And I tell you this wholeheartedly, that guy can talk shit with the best of them. He was running his mouth on any sort of play where the defense made a stop, and he was letting them know. And so I loved it. I love that he's kind of stepping up and kind of becoming that one of the leaders on the defense, even just in year 2. So that was really cool. That was really cool to see, especially in person. When you talk about the corners and you talk about Stingley, there was a few plays that he got beat on some deep routes, and one-on-ones. But then again, in real life situations, typically he's going to have safety help. So I'm not too overly concerned about that. Any sort of plays over the middle and stuff like that, he did a really good job of maintaining his coverage on the wide receivers. Tavir Thomas I'm a big fan of Tavir. I really like Tavir. I've talked to Tavir a lot in the offseason, especially this year, and was super excited that he was brought back. And I feel like that's going to be one of the guys that maybe one of the unsung heroes of this defense this year. I feel like he can do some really good things if he's given the right opportunity. And as I mentioned earlier, Nelson, he had a really strong day at camp. We'll see kind of how this goes with the contract negotiations or whatever is going to happen between him and Nick Caserio. But hopefully they can hold on to him and work out a reasonable offer for both sides, and just keep helping this defense do its thing.
Do you think this could be a top 10 secondary in the NFL if the edge rushers, if the defensive line does their job?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the schedule, I feel like they can. I think it's in them. I think the 2 games against Tennessee are going to be some really big tests for those guys. Obviously because of Hopkins, but Treylon Burks coming in on year 2. All accounts, he's having a really strong camp and off season, so that's going to be an interesting duo.
We've got Jackson.
And I'm just saying,
we've got a top 7 NFL quarterback and Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram. That's kind of the game I've circled that show me what
yeah, those are going to be tough too. So, yeah, I mean, the AFC South, I'll say Jacksonville and Tennessee, those 4 games are going to be a true test for what this defense can really do, especially with the secondary, and if they're able to maintain because Jaguars got Calvin Ridley for virtually nothing. And seeing some of the clips that he's done in camp, the guy looks like he's just moving.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm worried. I think that the fan base understands that Jacksonville's good. I don't think everyone understands quite how good Trevor Lawrence is, and maybe they do. And just people in my mention, there are a lot of trolls on Twitter, Pat, and they love to tell me that he's not that good. I've gone back and watched a little Jacksonville this offseason. That guy's going to be a big problem, a really big problem for DeMeco Ryans' entire tenure. And adding Calvin Ridley to that equation and, shifting all of a sudden Christian Kirk's the number 2 concern, Evan Ingram on his drag routes where he's just trying to be faster than the linebacker that covers him, which, to Doug Peterson's credit, that worked a lot last season. It's probably going to work a lot this season. That works. That works a lot better. I'm excited to see this team play teams like Jacksonville, teams like the Jets. I think getting Rodgers in that receiving group is going to be a great test. They're going to have opportunities to show. And I think all of these guys right now, they're underrated for various reasons. Stingley overshadowed by Sauce. Steven Nelson's not a household name. Jimmy Ward, there was some drama in San Francisco. And then, of course, Talanoa Hufanga next to him was the all-pro. Jalen Petre's a little overlooked. All these guys collectively might not be viewed, I think, that the caliber that together what that defense might actually manifest as.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see, man. I feel like this is that, like you said, that the secondary group is going to be one to watch. And I feel like that there should be a dramatic difference just because of, that front 7 should help them a lot. We haven't even talked about the linebackers.
Do we want to talk about we're at 45 minutes. Do we want to take questions and save the front 7 for next episode, or do you want to talk about linebackers?
We can touch on it briefly. I mean,
All right. Tell us what you saw at camp today.
So Kirksey was off. I don't know if it was an injury or just a rest day. Kind of how the practice schedule is going right now is 3 days and then a day off. So they were off yesterday, so I don't know why he would be off 2 days in a row. But that they have things that they work out and stuff like that. But Henry Toa was running with the ones, and yeah, I think they found some hidden, some house money right there with him. Man, they got something in that guy that's gonna be special in this defense. Next to Christian Harris and whoever, if they put Perryman out there with them, I think that may be our starting three is Harris, Tuatoa, and Perryman, and I think that's going to be a pretty prolific group in this defense. So pretty excited about that as well. So just
that's
brief.
I mean, it's a big part of this group, and I'm excited to hear more observations from you about them. I do want to see the pads come on with linebackers, just because I think it is hard to simulate filling those gaps and like what pursuit actually looks like behind the front four until they're having to watch the front four go win physically against the offensive line. I mean, a lot of linebacker, their job is to read and react to how is the play flowing and where do they need to be.
Well, pads go on tomorrow, so we'll see. We were originally told they were going to go on today, and then everybody came out in shells, and all of us were disappointed.
I tweeted the day, and then someone immediately was like, "Actually, they're not." And I was like, well,
"Yeah." So
that's what I get for waking.
It's tomorrow, so it should be fun.
All right. Do we have any? We'll start on YouTube. Any comments or questions from the audience that's watching? We've got one request on Twitter Space. If anyone else wants to request on Twitter Space, we'll hit those after the YouTube comments.
See, I've got a couple on here. Let's see. One of them is asking if JJ will eventually play for the team this year. No, JJ
it's done.
Is done, man. Like there's just no football left in that guy right now.
Storm, were you you weren't on the JJ retirement Zoom call that we got to do, right?
No.
That guy, he's done with football. He is. I mean, he'll even joke about it. He could have kept making money. He knows that he would have probably received an 8-figure contract as an edge rusher. Yeah. He had 10 sacks last season, but I think that is a guy who is excited to be with his family and excited to pursue non-football ventures.
Yep. See, Beige is asking for my hat. Sorry, Beige, I can't send that to you.
Is that a draft? Is that from the draft?
This is from a couple years ago. It's got the We Are Texans on this side. So
I like
the
it.
NFL logo on the back. Yeah, it was cool, man. I went and it was hanging up in the closet. I haven't worn a Texans hat in a while. I mean, every hat I wear lately has been baseball. So I decided I was going to go in there and dig this one out. Let's see. This one here from Arthur says, which defensive end duo starts? Anderson, Hughes, Grenard? Anderson and Hughes, I feel like, is going to be your starters. I genuinely don't think Jacob Martin makes the roster. I feel like he's going to be one of the guys that ends up getting, being that veteran guy that gets let go so he can go pursue an opportunity somewhere else. And Grenard, man, I need him to stay healthy, man. That's the biggest thing with him. I had high hopes for him. I was really high on him coming into the draft, and then they ended up picking him. And it's been a little bit of a disappointment so far. But yeah, I think Arthur, I think Anderson and Hughes are going to be your starting duo for sure. What do you think?
I mean, I think Will Anderson is absolutely starting. So let's just go ahead and check one of those off. And I think you can make this question as simple as Hughes versus Grenard. I think in a perfect world, the coaching staff would prefer that Grenard becomes that player. But I think to start the season, until we start to see some momentum from him, that it's going to be Jerry Hughes. I think Jerry Hughes, especially on third down, was a more impactful player last year. I think right now it sounds like through early stages of camp. And of course, all this with the caveat, pads are not on yet. But I think it's going to be Hughes to start. And I would hope that by week 7, week 8, maybe Grenard's working into that starting role, and you can let Hughes, as an older veteran on the team, become a third down pass rusher that you're excited to bring in on some key downs. But for now, no reason I'm not going to pick Jerry Hughes as well.
Yeah. Let's see, ultra tough scene. Who are the likely starting wide receivers and who has stood out so far? Man, the typical names, Tank Dell and Mechie have done some really good things. I saw somebody mention Noah Brown earlier. Noah Brown has actually done really well. He made some plays today, and that kind of surprised me a little bit. We'll see if he can find a role in this offense. Man, he's a bigger wide receiver, somebody that is a potential threat for the end zone, and so I think they definitely need that. Considering some of the other guys are not, like Tank Dell, he's a smaller guy. He's going to be that, obviously, and Mechie's not exactly that big. He's not small, but I think Noah Brown could be that possession wide receiver that they need in the end zone. So,
I was going to say, I think Robert Woods, if we're talking about a 3 wide receiver set, I think Robert Woods will start at one of those positions. That's a guy that you trust him in the passing game as a route runner. You trust his hands and him that he's going to be at the spots that he needs, but also you trust him as a blocker. And I think that's something people aren't thinking about. Opposite of him, Pat brought this. Noah Brown was kind of brought in as an afterthought, but he's having a great camp, and he's someone that you do trust to block. So could it be a split with Nico Collins like on some of these earlier downs? That wouldn't shock me to see if it's Noah Brown at the opposite end. But for now, I am going to say Nico. I think he's more talented. And then I'd want to say Tank, but Tank is – I'm going to have to see it with Tank Dell to think that he's not a gadget player until it happens. Not that it's like going to be gimmicky, but he is just so small that it's hard to project that he's an every down player right now. So I would put Mechie as that like consistent slot role.
That's fair. Definitely fair. Do you guys think they make a trade for anyone or at least make a call for someone? I mean, who knows? There may be at this point. It's too early to say. I mean, there's no glaring need on this team outside of a number 1 wide receiver, really. But I don't think they're gonna. That's not the deal that I could see coming to fruition this year, at least. Unless a team approaching the deadline that has, unless Cincinnati somehow is approaching the deadline and they're in last place in the division somehow, and they're looking to offload a guy maybe, but I don't think they'd let any of their wide receivers go. I don't know, man. I don't see anything.
Yeah, I think if they were going to make, and when I see a question like that, I'm assuming that we're speaking in the context of like a meaningful trade. Like, are they going to go get a starter? Because fans, and generally me too, I don't think they're going to trade resources for a depth piece at this point. You might, but what people want to know, are we going to go get someone that's starting week 1 on this roster? I would say no. If that was going to happen at the wide receiver position, it would have been addressed by now. Thank you, Just Beige in the comments. Definitely do like and subscribe. We're going to be doing this every week, at least once a week. Really excited to start the channel. But yeah, for now, I think this is the core roster. The difference makers that if we don't know about them, it's not because they're not on the team yet. It's because they haven't shown us that they're difference makers yet.
Yeah. So, all right, what do we got on Spaces? You said you had somebody waiting.
Spaces, we had someone, and now we don't have anyone anymore. And guys, if you're listening on Spaces, thank you again for joining us. Storm, it's funny. This is the first time we've ever done a live stream together, but it doesn't feel like that because I've hosted so many different conversations with you over Twitter Spaces. So a lot of love for our Twitter audience, guys, and make sure you're checking out our content on YouTube. And if you want to drop us a follow there as well. If you missed any part of the conversation, it might take me a day to figure out how it's done, but this is going to be on Spotify under the Texans Wire old feed. It should be updated soon to say another Texans podcast, but right now it might be titled Texans Talk. So if you want to follow and subscribe, we'll be posting a link for that tomorrow on Twitter. But yeah, I think Storm, I think we got a couple questions. Yes, of course.
It'll be on YouTube also, so you can go back and watch us if you want to see our face while you listen to us.
I mean,
good
looking dude.
Let's see. Arthur asks, "Is Scruggs a lock at center?" Man, it's way too early to say. He was running with the ones today, so we'll see.
Wait, he was with the ones today? That's not something I saw. Okay, that's kind of news. If it's news to me, I feel like a good portion of our
at least the you know, and they were mixing it up, right? Like, so I say he was with the ones. There was a few times that CJ was with the ones as well, at least the offensive line. So they mix things up. So that's why when people are like, "Oh, he's with the ones," I'm like, okay, there's not a one team, a two team, and a three team that they stick with the entire practice. It doesn't work like that. At least not what I saw today. So,
I mean, this is training camp. This is their time to experiment with the talent that they have on the roster and play, especially at the offensive line. It's kind of finding the right combination. I would say, I mean, I know that on other days he hadn't worked with the first team yet, but guys, he went in the top 50 of the draft this year, and they took him way higher than anyone had projected to take him. I think it's fair to say that this coaching staff likes Juice Scruggs a lot, and that he will be given every opportunity to win that job as soon as possible when the pads come on. So I can't wait to see this line with pads. I think they're going to bully some people. How did Kenyon Green look today, by the way, before we close it down?
Look fine. I didn't see any, I didn't see him getting beat. Nobody was out there making him look stupid. So
okay.
We'll hopefully we have a better gauge of it this week once the pads get on there. So because they'll have camp tomorrow and Tuesday. They will be off on Wednesday, and then they do Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Saturday is the nighttime camp, so that's the one that starts at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. So I'll be out there for that one again. I won't be able to make any of the ones during the week this week. Obviously, I've got to work and pay the bills because this isn't doing that yet. But
we'll get there. You'll get
there. Someday, man. Baby steps, right? You got to start somewhere. So
excited to start here for now. Storm, tell people where they can find you and find your content as we get into training camp.
Twitter and Instagram at Patrick Storm HTX. Then, of course, the YouTube channel is at Another Texans Podcast. So we'll be doing more stuff there. I may look at doing some YouTube shorts, depending on what happens during the week, if there's any news or anything like that. So keep an eye out for that. This is all still very infantile for us. So we're trying to figure out what's going to work best. Yep. Now, your turn, John. Where can they find you?
You guys can follow me on Twitter at John H. Crumpler, on Instagram and Thread. I don't think anyone's going to use Thread, so whatever. But Instagram at Texans Doc. You can find all of my work at the Texans Wire, texanswire.usatoday.com. Texans Wire and my editor, Mark Lane, is graciously hosting the podcast. So we'll be posting links as recaps as well on that website of each episode. Again, make sure you're following us on YouTube. We're very excited about the launch there at Another Texans Podcast. And you should be able to, if you're going to miss episodes, you're going to be able to subscribe on Spotify as well if you're a podcast person while you run. So all of that's going to be titled Another Texans Podcast. So thanks to everyone for listening. And Storm, I'm very excited about this.
It's going to be fun, man. It's going to be a great time.
All right.
All right. We will see y'all later.